I'm familiar with some of their catalog now, since we've been doing this, and I've done a couple of digs on them, but nothing too heavy. This song, much like Hey Young World, appears to be kind of an outlier song. Like, this is not what they normally do. Would that be
Yeah.
affirmative?
Um,
Well,
this song is much more. It was written by Graham Nash, who is the Nash and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Obviously, he was in a band in the UK. He's the British one of the four. He was in a band called the Hollies, like holly leaves or holly trees, the Hollies. And this was a song that was rejected from them. Like he wrote it while he was a member of that band, and they decided not to record it. He's Graham Nash is also the one that we have discussed previously. That he's the guy that Joni Mitchell wrote A Case of You about.
yes.
He's that guy. So again, this is multi-faceted personality, right? Because this is a very sweet song. I mean, it's not, when you dig into the lyrics, it's not as sweet as you would think on the surface, but it's it's very cheerful. It's definitely very cheerful sounding.
Yeah.
Um, and then you have that guy, but also you have the, can we say son of a bitch that Joni Mitchell's singing about in that song too. So you have, we contain multitudes. We have lots of different, not personalities, but different facets to our personality. So,
Yes.
there's lots of pieces of context for this. I don't want this. I want to make sure we're talking about the song too, and not just the history of these guys. But really, really, really quickly, there's four guys: David Crosby, Stephen Stills, Graham Nash, Neil Young. Um, they didn't live together, but they lived around each other in the Laurel Canyon neighborhood, and that's outside LA, I think. It's definitely in Southern California. Um, but that was part of like it wasn't a commune, but it was like a neighborhood that a lot. I mean, the Doors, like Jim Morrison, lived there, and Robbie Krieger. Joni
Oh,
Mitchell lived there. The members of the Byrds, Roger McGuire, McGuinn, lived there. The Mamas and the Papas, Cass Elliot, those people,
well,
Buffalo Springfield. So it was a mishmash of folky rock people. I mean, the Doors weren't really folk rock. And David Crosby, actually, modern David Crosby, like in his 70's, was shit posting about Jim Morrison and the Doors on Twitter. That's one of those other famous curmudgeon things. But so David Crosby was originally a member of a band called the Byrds, Byrds. Um, which is Turn, and Mr. Tambourine Man, as the McKenna said earlier. Stephen Stills and Neil Young were in a band called Buffalo Springfield, among other things. I mean, they also had solo stuff and did stuff together, but like where they were most famous before this thing. And Graham Nash was in the Hollies. So this is Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young is kind of a super group. I think you would think of like famous members of multiple bands all coming together to do a thing. Crosby, Stills, and Nash had a band before Neil Young started too. Like they
kind of
had a thing
back,
with them.
like Wu-Tang done backwards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So they're some of the most famous, and I want to use the word precise with them because their music is beautiful because it is precise. And a lot of the music that comes from the folk rock blues is kind of messy. Like, it sounds like just a guy sitting like Dylan and stuff. Like just a guy sitting there playing guitar, and if you have a couple mistakes in there, just kind of roll on with it or whatever.
But when
This is, and David Crosby particularly was one of those, like, that's one of the ways he was a dick. They were like super, super, super like everything, and you
right,
can hear it in the harmonies in these songs. Like they are, it sounds like, if you've never heard Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young sing, you should go listen to the song now. But it sounds almost like it's the same person singing four parts at once. It's
mm,
the blend of it is it's not something that you've really heard before, and the harmony they're singing is a little different too. Nash is the one who's got that high part on it. Um, and that note, the high note, is the one that differentiates their harmonies from a lot of other bands too.
right.
Like it's a very specific chord they're singing.
When you're saying high note, are you saying high note like soprano or like tenor?
I'm saying like falsetto, so somewhere in between the two, probably.
Okay. Okay. Right. Somewhere in between. Right. Okay. Well,
Crosby's
that's
definitely,
hard to. Well, that's hard to do in rhythm with other bandmates. So the
and they do it
actual
with four. Yeah,
yeah. Well, the rhythmic pull off of that when you're explaining that, no, that's hard.
yeah,
Like people don't understand it is like. Not being funny because I'm black, we're always talking we're black, we have rhythm. It's like, yeah, I get it. You know how hard it is to like harmonize with
mhm,
somebody else who has rhythm though? Like
yeah,
you having rhythm and somebody else having rhythm doesn't mean y'all are operating on the same rhythm.
yeah. And they were famously operating on the same wavelengths. Like you can hear that, and like you can hear when people are vibing like that, and
Mm-hmm.
not, and they definitely were.
You know. I mean, so the first thing that caught me about this record,
Hmm.
like you gave me a list of songs of theirs,
Hmm.
and I went there first actually, because even title wise, I was like, that's the outlier. But in not even the name of the song, when I heard the melody, I was like, we're doing Hey Young World. As soon as the melody came on. Because
Yeah.
actually, I think it's always hard to juxtapose a hip hop melody
Hmm.
off a machine bass, off of Clyde Stubblefield's drums being put into a
Yeah.
freaking machine to an actual live band playing. But the rhythmic nuance of both of these records is
Hmm.
immediately where I realized these songs go together. And
Yep.
then when I listen and in the message, I'm like, well, this is a flawless victory. And you usually pick the song, and I
Yeah.
usually give the hip hop songs, but when you gave me that, I was like, oh, I'm like, this is perfect. I know what we're doing. I was like, I
Perfect.
knew
Yeah.
exactly what we were doing after I heard Teach the Children one time. I was like, oh, I already know. I was
Yeah.
already know.
And when you said that, I hadn't heard Hey Young World in a long time, and I played them back to back. And I was like, oh, that's, yeah. I had the same reaction. Like this is exactly right. Exactly
Yep,
right.
you're right. Yeah, this is one of those pairings that I feel like was kind of supposed to happen. It's like I
Yeah.
know we're doing, posthumously from losing an icon and a great musician and
Hmm.
singer and writer, but it's like, nah, that shit fits. Now let's get to the message and the theme and the actual
Hmm.
lyrics of this
Yeah.
song. Now, where would you put them? I mean, you brought up, a case of you, so that would be songwriting at its peak.
Yeah. Yes, that's the very top level.
Yeah, that's top level songwriting. Where would you put the songwriting on here?
On this particular
Yeah,
song is definitely below that, but it's not, I mean, it's not bad songwriting. It's um remember we talked with David Matthews about the groove being the point and not
yeah,
the words necessarily. Not that the
yeah.
words are bad, just that's not. And I would say the harmonies are the point here. Like like the and that is not to say that the songwriting is bad or inferior. Um, they asked famously, I don't know, a few years ago, that Spin magazine asked Crosby, like, what are his, they do like that with artists, saying like, what are your five indispensable albums or whatever, like the five that you keep going back to. Two of them were Steely Dan albums, Gaucho and Aja, I don't know how he says it, um which are, which fits with Crosby because those are very like obsessively precise albums too. um and but the third one on his list was Joni Mitchell's Blue, which he produced, by the way. But that's another one of those crossovers between the
Right.
bands. So Crosby produced Joni Mitchell's album, but he says it's probably the best singer songwriter album that's ever been made. And like, I mean, there are
Hold on. When
others
he's
that are up there too, but like, I can't argue with that. That's it's something
it's like
else.
that.
Yeah, the whole record's that way all the way through.
Oh
It's
no,
not
I need
just
to
that
listen
song.
to it. I know you told me to, and I'd actually went and listened to a piece of it, but I'd probably need to sit down one day and listen to it from beginning to end.
Yeah, it's a headphones album, like
Yeah,
sitting.
no, it strikes me like well, she strikes me that way
Mhm.
just inherently every time I hear her. It's like, oh, I need to sit down and just do it all at once.
Yeah.
It's like I mean, I used her to bring up Virginia Woolf. It's almost like, well, there is no like leaving a Virginia Woolf poem halfway in and then understanding what the fuck is going on now, is it?
Yeah, no, you're gonna be lost. No, like the songs on Blue, not to get too far off, but I mean, we are. I mean, all these people know each other, and they're all friends, and they're all, it's all overlapping. Um, the songs work as independent pieces. Like you can listen to A Case of You or California or, I mean, any of those songs like independently. But the effect that they have when you put them all together is you see them as it's one of those albums that works both with individual pieces and as like one longer piece of music too. It all kind of connects as it goes. And Deja Vu, actually, the album that the song comes from, has that kind of feel to it too. Not to the level Joni's does, I don't think, but it's Deja Vu is still a really, really, really good record. This was also 1970, so it's right in the heart of all of that stuff. You were asking, I think, like, where would I contextualize their songwriting and their stuff? I think their songwriting, I don't even think they would say their songwriting's on the same level as Joni Mitchell's. Like, I don't think they would say that either. There are very few people in the world that would say their songwriting, that would even say out loud that their songwriting is on them.
No,
it's a really, really short list.
Yeah, it's a short.
Think of, if you've never heard Crosby, Stills and Nash or Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, if you're listening to this episode and you haven't heard them, think of them like halfway between the Beatles and like Bob Dylan. All right, those are the Bob Dylan was one of those people that had kind of a prickly relationship with them too. Bob Dylan also put them on, like the Byrds on. Bob Dylan wrote Mr. Tambourine Man. Like he's the one who wrote that song, and they played a version of it.
And everybody
heard them play it, and he was like, "Oh, that's actually really good, guys. You can keep
like rap. Everybody know each other some type of way.
Yeah,
it's just like rap.
Yeah, especially in this era, like they're all like
specifically talking about this era too, because every time that you talk about this era, we can just start piecing everybody together, and they start falling out of each other's studio and songwriting credits in the sky. Yeah,
exactly. So, they produced each other's albums. They wrote songs for each other. The song "Our House," that's also on Deja Vu. I think it's on Deja Vu. I'm pretty sure. It was Graham Nash writing about Joni Mitchell and their house together. Like, I mean, it all kind of fits.
Like Wu-Tang in reverse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Joni Mitchell would be the jizza. She's the writer.
Mm-hmm.
She's the lyrical, sharp one.
Yeah.
And the quiet one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she is very quiet. But she also famously had problems. I don't know exactly the genesis of this. I just know, like, when she was playing her most recent shows, Joni had, I think, I'm going to butcher this, I'm sorry. I think she had a stroke. And so she's been kind of out of the public eye for a while, and she's performed a couple times in the last year or two, just sitting in a chair with a bunch of other friends and musicians and whatever. And she doesn't have the high voice, but she still has the voice, and it still has the command, just sitting there on the chair. But I remember reading during that time that she and Bob Dylan were not like, they were kind of not great friends. I don't know why. Maybe it's a competitive thing. I don't know.
I think it's competitive.
Or maybe it's a thing where people were talking about him being like the greatest songwriter or one of the great songwriters, and not talking about her. If she is not better than that, she is certainly on that level for sure. She is one of the greats, greats.
Typically, when a man on that level and a woman on that level don't get along, it's because the man's insecure about the woman, not the other way around. And
that would be my guess.
And that's my guess.
And she's better. Like, it's say Joni Mitchell's better than you. Like, it's not like saying Paul McCartney's better than you. Great. I mean, like, that's not saying much of it. He's better than everybody. Like,
that's what everybody.
Hey y'all, thanks for making it to the end of the video. Make sure to click like and subscribe to our channel, and come back here later in the week. Right here, I'm going to put the full episode that this clip comes from on Friday. So come back and check that out. We'll see you next time.